You're not stuck because you're weak. You're stuck because you keep showing up as the same person, to the same people, expecting a different life. Think about that for a second. Everyone around you has already decided who you are. Your coworkers, your family, even your friends. They've built a mental image of you, and every single day, without realizing it, you're performing that image back to them. Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people never want to admit. People don't respond to who you are. They respond to who they believe you are. That's not manipulation, that's psychology. And here's what nobody tells you. Reinventing yourself isn't about becoming someone new. It's about refusing to keep being someone old. 7 principles, each one pulled from Machiavellian philosophy. Each one designed to rebuild how you think, what you accept, and who you ultimately become. Don't skip any part of this video, not even the section that feels slightly too personal, especially that one. Because that discomfort you feel, that's not coincidence. That's recognition. And recognition is where every real change begins. Number 1. The cage you can't see is still a cage. When did you last make a genuinely free decision, without mentally running it through what the people around you might think? If you're pausing, that pause is worth examining. Somewhere along the way, other people's expectations quietly became your personality. Not all at once. It happened in layers, through years of small adjustments, careful compromises, and just performing the version of you that everyone around you seemed most comfortable with. Machiavelli studied this dynamic closely in political courts. He observed that the most dangerous trap a leader could fall into wasn't an enemy's attack. It was allowing other people's perception of him to harden into his permanent reality. When people expect a certain version of you, they push you back into it, often without even knowing they're doing it. A raised eyebrow, a dismissive "that's not like you," a silence that essentially says, "Stay where we put you." Carl Jung explored this through what he called the persona, the social mask we construct for the world. His concern wasn't the mask itself. It was the moment a person could no longer distinguish where the mask ended and their actual face began. For most people, that moment arrives gradually and passes without anyone noticing, including them. Reinvention starts with a single uncomfortable question. Is the identity you've been living inside actually yours, or did you quietly inherit it from someone else's comfort zone? Number 2. Your inner story is either your compass or your cage. You tell yourself you're not really that type of person. You say, with complete certainty, "I've always been like this." You shrug it off over dinner. "Oh, that's just me." But have you ever actually stopped to ask, who told you that first, and why did you believe them? The narrative running inside your head right now wasn't written today. It was written years ago, by a younger and far less experienced version of you, in circumstances that no longer exist, and somehow, you've been treating it as permanent truth ever since. Machiavelli built his entire political framework around the concept of fortuna, the unpredictable current of the world that never stops shifting. The person who survives isn't the one with the most rigid plan. It's the one willing to rewrite their story when the current changes direction. Marcus Aurelius spent years doing exactly this, not through grand gestures, but through daily, deliberate examination of the thoughts his mind produced. He questioned them before accepting them. That single habit separated him from nearly every ruler of his era. Your story may feel real, it may feel permanent, but there is a meaningful gap between something feeling true and something being true. The narrative explaining why you can't change? That may be the very first thing that needs to go. Number 3. What you tolerate becomes what you accept. What you accept becomes who you are. Look at your life right now. Honestly, not the version you describe to someone you're trying to impress, but the actual one. The relationships you stay in, the conversations you sit through without pushing back, the behavior you let slide from other people and quietly from yourself. Now ask this question without softening it. Do those things reflect who you want to be or who you've slowly stopped questioning? Most people set their standards based on what they believe they deserve. And what they believe they deserve is almost entirely shaped by what they were told as children, what they watched growing up, and what pain they've gradually learned to call normal. It's a ceiling you didn't build consciously, but you're living under it every single day. Machiavelli was direct about this. He argued that weak states didn't collapse from outside pressure alone. They collapsed because the people inside had quietly stopped holding the internal line. Standards aren't rules someone else imposes on you. They're signals you send to yourself about the kind of person you're willing to be. Aristotle suggested that excellence isn't a single dramatic act. It's what emerges when a behavior gets repeated until it becomes character. Whatever you repeatedly allow becomes your normal. And normal is perhaps the most dangerous word in personal development because it stops you from questioning things that absolutely should be questioned. Number 4. Not everyone around you is on your side, even if they love you. Whose disappointment are you afraid of right now? Don't answer quickly. Sit with that question. Because whoever came to mind, that fear has real power over your decisions. And you gave it that power, probably gradually, probably without full awareness, and probably longer ago than you'd like to admit. Machiavelli warned about something he observed repeatedly in political courts. The people closest to a leader who benefit from his current state will, consciously or not, resist his transformation, not because they hate him, but because a changed leader unsettles their position. A predictable person is a safe person for everyone around them. The same dynamic runs through everyday life. The friend who laughs a little too quickly when you share a new ambition. The family member who keeps referencing who you used to be. They may not be working against you deliberately, but their comfort with your old version creates a gravitational pull, subtle, consistent, and working against the new one. Seneca wrote that we absorb the character of those we spend time with, quietly, gradually, the way fabric absorbs color when it's soaked long enough. Reinvention doesn't require cruelty toward anyone. But it does require honesty about whose presence genuinely expands you, and whose, without meaning to, quietly keeps you contained. That distinction alone could change everything. Number 5. Stop announcing who you're becoming before you've become it. When was the last time you accomplished something meaningful and told absolutely nobody? That question probably feels foreign. We live in an era where everything gets announced before it's real. Every new routine, every goal, every new chapter, posted before it's had time to take root. And here's something almost nobody says out loud. That habit may be quietly dismantling your transformation before it has a chance to breathe. Machiavelli was deeply interested in the psychology of perception. He observed that the most formidable leaders were rarely the loudest ones. They were the ones whose next move simply couldn't be predicted. Mystery carries social weight. When people cannot fully read you, they tend to project onto you. And that projection, over time, converts into real influence. There's a psychological reality underneath this. When you announce an identity shift before it's established, you invite judgment and social feedback at the exact moment when the new version of you is most fragile. Most people quietly retreat back into the old identity, not from weakness, but because the timing was wrong. Build in silence. Let the results introduce themselves. The new identity doesn't need a platform. It needs consistency. And consistency, practiced privately and without applause, has a way of eventually becoming impossible to ignore. Number 6. You can't build a new life on an undisciplined mind. Be honest with yourself. How many times have you started over, genuinely motivated, genuinely convinced, This time was different, only to find yourself back at the same starting line within weeks. That's not a motivation problem. It's not about willpower either, not really. It's about the ongoing negotiation between your present self and your future self. Right now, in most people's lives, the present self wins almost every round. Machiavelli believed that a ruler who couldn't govern his own impulses would inevitably be governed by the impulses of others. Emotion without direction doesn't just create external chaos, it turns inward and becomes a slow, quiet form of self-destruction. Every time you break a commitment to yourself, every time you say yes when you meant no, or stop when you could have continued, you send a message to your own subconscious. Your word doesn't carry weight. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was once a slave, built his entire framework around a single distinction: what falls within your control and what doesn't. Outcomes, opinions, and circumstances, those shift. Your response to them, that belongs to you entirely. Self-mastery isn't about becoming cold or emotionally detached. It's about deciding who gets to emerge when real pressure arrives. That kind of identity doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need defending. It simply holds. And that, eventually, becomes the most visible thing about you. Number 7. The new version of you doesn't need permission. It needs action. How long have you been waiting to become who you actually want to be? Not in theory, not someday when things settle. How many months, possibly years, have you spent waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, or that specific feeling of readiness before you allow yourself to actually change? Machiavelli spent years studying the difference between those who shaped history and those who were simply carried by it. His conclusion wasn't that one group was smarter or more fortunate. It was that they were willing to act before the outcome was guaranteed. Identity doesn't arrive through declarations, it forms through decisions. Small ones, repeated ones, made quietly and often when no one is watching. Who you are is not what you announce publicly. It's what you choose at 11 p.m. when motivation has evaporated and discomfort has moved in. It's what you do when the easier option is right there and nobody would blame you for taking it. Psychologist William James, one of the earliest thinkers to seriously study human identity, observed something deeply counterintuitive. We don't think our way into a new way of living. We live our way into a new way of thinking. Act first. The belief follows. The new version of you doesn't need a grand announcement. By the time people finally notice the change, you'll have already been living it for months. Conclusion. 7 principles. 1 purpose. You are not fixed. You are not permanently defined by the image other people constructed around you during a time when you had fewer choices, less clarity, and less understanding of what you were actually capable of. Machiavelli didn't write about reinvention as a luxury or a self-improvement hobby. He wrote about it as survival. The world shifts, circumstances change. And the person who cannot adapt, or better yet, move ahead of the change, gets left behind by the version of life they could have been living. This was never about becoming someone unrecognizable. It's about finally becoming someone you actually recognize in the mirror, someone you respect. Now, one thing before you go. Which of these 7 points landed the hardest for you? Which one made you sit back slightly, or made you feel like it was written about your life specifically? Drop it in the comments. Don't just type the number. Tell me why. Because your answer to that question says more about where you actually are than anything I could say in this video. If something here felt true, share it with someone who's been waiting too long to change. Like this video if even one idea challenged you. And subscribe if you want to keep thinking at this level. Because the old version of you got you here. It won't get you where you're going.